It was extraordinary listening to that last answer from the Prime Minister. Inflation was 2% when Conservatives left office. 2%. It's now nearly double that. When will he recognise that it's Labour's budget driving up inflation?
3 minutes ago, the House of Commons erupted in a way few will forget. Keir Starmer walked in with his usual calm demeanour, expecting to control the room, but what followed left him humiliated and silent. In a brutal live TV clash, Kemi Badenoch unleashed a line of attack so sharp, so devastating, that even Starmer's own MPs couldn't hide their shock. Gasps, laughter and disbelief filled the chamber as Badenoch dismantled him piece by piece. And here's the truth, this wasn't just another heated exchange. This was a turning point, a moment that exposed cracks in Starmer's leadership and left the nation asking, is he really fit to lead Britain?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, the head of the OBR warned the government that higher and higher levels of taxes are bad for growth. Does the Prime Minister agree?
Prime Minister.
It started with a question so simple, yet so loaded that Starmer couldn't wriggle free, no matter how hard he tried. Kemi Badenoch leaned forward, her voice calm but cutting. Does the Prime Minister now admit that he was wrong to strip pensioners of the winter fuel payment they depend on? The words seemed polite, almost harmless on the surface, but everyone in the chamber knew what was coming. It was the political equivalent of handing him a smiling bullet. Starmer froze. He knew he'd quietly pushed through cuts that would hit millions of elderly Britons in the middle of winter, and now, live on television, he was being forced to defend it. What followed was nothing short of a collapse. He mumbled about balancing the books and stabilising the economy, but the more he spoke, the worse it got. The chamber erupted, not in support, but in disbelief. Laughter rippled across the benches, some MPs shaking their heads, others burying their faces in their hands. Even Labour MPs could be seen looking away, unable to defend him. The brutal reality was clear. Starmer had left pensioners out in the cold, and Badenoch was dragging that truth into the light for all of Britain to see. Her attack wasn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. She painted the human cost in sharp, unforgiving detail. 9 million pensioners relied on those payments, £200 to £300, that meant warmth, safety and survival during the bitter winter months. Without it, experts warned, thousands could freeze to death. Imagine that, thousands of grandparents across Britain, quietly suffering in silence, abandoned by the very man who promised to protect them. Badenoch's words cut deeper with every line. The only black hole is the one the Prime Minister is digging. And she was right. The so-called financial crisis Starmer spoke of wasn't created by pensioners. It wasn't created by the NHS. It was created by years of failure, reckless policies and tax dodging by the elite. And now he expected the poorest, the most vulnerable, to carry the burden. The chamber shifted uncomfortably, and for the first time it was Starmer, not his opponents, who looked utterly cornered. This wasn't a debate anymore, it was a demolition. Badenoch wasn't just questioning his policies, she was questioning his morality. She reminded him that his own mayor in Doncaster had spoken out against the cuts. His own First Minister in Wales had called it wrong. Over 50 Labour MPs had pleaded for him to reverse course. Even opposition leaders from other parties had joined in the outrage. It wasn't just Tories against him, it was his own ranks. And yet there he stood, fumbling, dodging, hiding behind economic jargon. Badenoch struck again. Will the Prime Minister at least listen to his own party and change course? The silence that followed was deafening. He had no answer, no defence, no way out. In that moment, Starmer wasn't the leader of the opposition. He was a man exposed, stripped of authority, his words collapsing around him. But the blow that truly crushed him was yet to come. Badenoch turned the issue into something far bigger than numbers and politics. She tied it to the very heart of trust and leadership. This is not about statistics. This is about real people, real pain, and real betrayal. Those words echoed across the chamber like a hammer blow, and they rang true. Britain's pensioners had trusted Starmer's promises. They believed in his words about fairness and justice. But now, all they saw was betrayal. Betrayal from the very man they thought would stand up for them. The clash wasn't just brutal, it was historic. And for Keir Starmer, it may well have been the moment his leadership began to unravel before the eyes of the nation. The silence didn't last long. Starmer tried to fight back, fumbling through pages of pre-written lines, but every sentence only made him look weaker. He spoke about responsibility, about hard choices, and about fixing the mess left behind, but nobody was convinced. His words sounded hollow, rehearsed, detached from reality. Badenoch, however, wasn't about to let him escape. She leaned in again, her tone sharper this time. Mr. Speaker, let's be clear. The only responsibility the Prime Minister has shown is abandoning the elderly to the cold. He talks of hard choices, but the hardest choice will now fall on pensioners: heat their homes or buy their food. That is his legacy. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Every camera lens zoomed in on Starmer's face as the weight of her words crushed his defence. His usual calm expression faltered. The mask slipped, revealing not strength, but panic. It wasn't just about pensions anymore. Badenoch widened her attack to expose the deeper failures of his leadership. She reminded the nation of Labour's crumbling support in the heartlands. Seats they had held for decades were slipping away to Reform UK, where angry pensioners and betrayed families were voting with fury. In Runcorn and Helsby, a once safe Labour stronghold, a 15,000 vote majority had evaporated into a shocking loss by just 6 votes. Badenoch didn't let that slip by. This is the reality. Pensioners do not forget. They showed up at the ballot box and they will show up again. You cannot betray them and expect them to stay silent. The chamber shifted again. Labour MPs looked at one another nervously. They knew the truth. The voters were revolting, and Badenoch was giving their anger a voice. Starmer tried to pivot, dragging the conversation toward economic recovery, investment and international trade. He mentioned deals with countries like India, record spending in the NHS and the so-called triple lock that supposedly protected pensions. But the chamber wasn't buying it. His words felt like smoke, drifting aimlessly, offering no warmth. Badenoch pounced instantly. Let the record show the Prime Minister's message is simple: balance the books on the backs of pensioners. He talks of India and trade deals, but try telling that to the grandmother in Doncaster who is wondering how she will survive the winter. He talks of stabilising the economy, but the only thing he has stabilised is the misery of millions. The blow landed hard. MPs on both sides reacted. Some shouted, others jeered. But the truth was undeniable. Starmer was bleeding politically, and Badenoch was circling like a hawk. The clash turned darker when she confronted him with his own party's disunity. Your First Minister in Wales says you are wrong. Your Mayor in Doncaster says you are wrong. Over 50 Labour MPs have pleaded with you to reverse course. Even your friends are against you. If you will not listen to me, will you at least listen to them? Starmer had no answer. He tried to speak, but the jeers drowned him out. His voice cracked, his arguments evaporated, and in that moment, it wasn't just Badenoch attacking him. It was the weight of his own party's betrayal pressing down on his shoulders. The chamber could sense it. A leader who had once spoken with authority now looked like a man drowning in his own failures. And then came the knockout. Badenoch raised her voice just enough to command silence and then delivered the line that would dominate headlines across Britain. Mr. Speaker, the only black hole in this country is the one this Prime Minister is digging with his own hands. The words echoed. Laughter erupted from the Conservative benches while Labour MPs sat frozen, some visibly grimacing at the humiliation of their leader. Starmer looked shattered. There was no witty comeback, no clever defence, no shield left to hide behind. He had been stripped bare, dismantled in front of the nation, and Badenoch was the one holding the blade. This wasn't politics as usual. This was a public dissection, and the country was watching. Pensioners at home, families struggling with bills, voters across the nation, they all saw a Prime Minister who couldn't defend his decisions, a leader who crumbled under pressure, and an opponent who wasn't afraid to speak the truth. Starmer may have walked into Parliament with his head held high, but he walked out battered, bruised and humiliated. The clash was brutal, it was raw, and it was unforgettable. And it was only the beginning. If Section 1 was about exposing betrayal and Section 2 was about humiliation, what came next was a complete dismantling of Starmer's so-called vision for Britain. Badenoch turned the focus from pensioners to energy, the lifeline of every household, every business, every family struggling to keep the lights on. Her words cut sharper than ever. Mr. Speaker, let us spell it out. Pensioners are poorer. Families are colder and jobs are vanishing because of this Prime Minister's energy obsession. He promised to cut energy bills by £300. Instead, bills have gone up. He promised stability. Instead, Britain has the highest energy costs in Europe. Why has the Prime Minister broken yet another promise to the British people? The chamber went silent for a moment and then erupted in shouts and jeers. Everyone knew the truth. Energy prices had spiralled out of control and Starmer had no real answer. Starmer tried, fumbling again, mumbling about clean, homegrown energy, long-term prosperity and warm homes discounts. He spoke about billions invested in renewables, about Britain's position as a global leader in net zero, and about apprenticeships in green industries. But the more he spoke, the more detached he sounded. It was as if he was giving a lecture to an empty room, not addressing the millions of Britons struggling to pay their energy bills. And Badenoch wasn't about to let him hide behind glossy words. She fired back instantly. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister can talk about clean energy all he likes, but here is the reality. Britain has the second highest share of renewables on the grid in Europe, and yet we also have the highest energy bills. This is not about clean energy. This is about broken promises. The truth is simple. He cannot cut energy bills because of his reckless net zero policy. The impact was electric. MPs on both sides leaned forward, sensing that something historic was unfolding. Badenoch didn't just challenge Starmer's policies, she tore them apart. She exposed the hypocrisy of a government that claimed to be building a green future while factories closed, jobs vanished and families froze. She listed the casualties. A ceramics factory in Stoke shut down just last week due to unbearable energy costs, leaving hundreds unemployed. That very morning, 250 more job losses were announced in the North Sea as Britain doubled its reliance on imported gas instead of harnessing its own resources. Her voice grew sharper. Mr. Speaker, why is this Prime Minister shutting down the North Sea, destroying British jobs, and leaving us dependent on foreign dictators, all to look good on the global stage? Isn't the truth that his climate obsession has left working families to pay the highest price? The chamber shook with noise. Labour MPs tried to shout her down, but it was useless. The facts were undeniable. The damage impossible to ignore. Starmer stood there, silent, flipping through his notes, searching desperately for a lifeline. But there was none, and Badenoch was about to strike harder than ever before. She pulled out a weapon he never expected, Tony Blair's own words. Mr. Speaker, let's be clear, this isn't just my view. Even Tony Blair, the former Labour Prime Minister, has called this approach to net zero irrational and doomed to fail. That's not me speaking, that's Tony Blair. The chamber erupted. Gasps, laughter and shouts echoed through the room. It was a devastating blow. For years, Starmer had clung to Blair's legacy, trying to present himself as the heir to New Labour. And now, in one swift move, Badenoch had weaponised Blair against him. It was humiliation on another level. She didn't need to twist the knife. Blair's words did the damage on their own. Starmer looked stunned, his mouth half open, as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. Badenoch pressed on. Mr. Speaker, if the Prime Minister will not listen to me, will he at least listen to Tony Blair? Because even he says these plans are irrational. Even he says they are doomed to fail. And even he knows that this Prime Minister has lost touch with reality. The air was electric. You could almost feel the tension through the television screens. Viewers at home saw it too, a Prime Minister stripped of credibility, betrayed by his own idol, cornered and crushed under the weight of his own policies. But Badenoch wasn't finished. She reminded the House and the country of the human cost behind Starmer's energy obsession. Families choosing between food and heating, pensioners shivering in their homes, workers laid off as factories closed. She framed it as betrayal in its purest form. Mr. Speaker, this is not progress, this is not leadership, this is betrayal disguised as policy. While he parades on the world stage, ordinary Britons are left with empty pockets and cold homes. The words hung in the air, heavy and unforgiving. Starmer had no response. He looked beaten, defeated and utterly exposed. This wasn't just a clash, this was a dismantling of everything he stood for. Badenoch had taken his proudest policy, net zero, and turned it into his greatest weakness. She had taken his idol, Tony Blair, and used him as a weapon. And she had taken his promises, cutting bills, creating jobs, protecting families, and shown them for what they really were: hollow, broken, and doomed. The House of Commons had witnessed many brutal exchanges before, but this was different. This was history unfolding in real time. And for Keir Starmer, it was nothing short of political devastation. By now, the chamber had transformed into something more like an arena than a debating hall. Keir Starmer, once confident, stood visibly shaken, his words scattered, his authority collapsing in front of millions watching at home. And Kemi Badenoch knew she had him right where she wanted. She pressed forward with relentless force, stripping away any last shred of defence he thought he had. Mr. Speaker, let's not pretend this is about leadership anymore. This is about survival. The Prime Minister has failed pensioners. He has failed working families. He has failed British industry, and now even his own party is saying it out loud. How much longer can he sit there pretending he has the country's trust? The chamber roared. Some Labour MPs sat stiffly, refusing to meet her gaze, while others fidgeted, their silence speaking louder than any words. For the first time, you could sense it. Real cracks forming in the fragile shield around Starmer's leadership. The weight of his failures was piling up like bricks on his shoulders. Badenoch reminded the House of every broken promise that had brought him here. The pension cuts carried out in silence. The energy bills that soared despite endless pledges to lower them. The net zero agenda that cost jobs while enriching foreign suppliers. And then she twisted the knife deeper. Mr. Speaker, when pensioners freeze in their homes this winter, when families stare at bills they cannot pay, when workers lose their jobs because of energy policies that don't work, will the Prime Minister stand before them and admit that it was all for nothing but his own vanity? The words landed like thunder. Gasps swept the benches. For a moment, even his allies couldn't defend him. Starmer tried to fight back, raising his voice, insisting that his government was investing in the future, creating jobs, and protecting Britain's global reputation. But those words sounded painfully weak against the avalanche of reality Badenoch had unleashed. Her rebuttal was swift and merciless. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister talks about the future, but what about the present? What about the pensioner shivering in Manchester tonight? What about the factory worker in Stoke who just lost his job? What about the families opening bills that are higher than their paychecks? The truth is there is no future for Britain under a leader who cannot even manage the present. The chamber erupted again. Conservative MPs cheered. Labour MPs sat stone-faced, their silence an admission of the damage that had been done. It was more than a debate now. It was a trial. Starmer stood as the accused, and Badenoch, with the weight of the people behind her, was the prosecutor. She painted the picture clearly. A leader who had failed to protect the most vulnerable, betrayed his own promises, and left Britain weaker, colder, and poorer. And then she asked the question that no Prime Minister ever wants to hear. Mr. Speaker, after so many broken promises, after so many failures, after so much betrayal, why should this man remain in office at all? The chamber fell into stunned silence. Even the Speaker seemed to pause, sensing the gravity of the moment. It wasn't just about policies anymore. It was about legitimacy itself. Viewers across the nation watching on live TV saw it too. Pensioners sitting in their cold living rooms, workers struggling to make ends meet, families worrying about the next bill. They all saw a Prime Minister cornered, exposed and humiliated. The image was devastating. Keir Starmer, unable to answer, unable to defend himself, reduced to silence by the unrelenting truth. His face told the story better than any headline could. He looked like a man who had run out of road.